Hey guys, it's Pastor Mike. I hope you guys are all doing really well today. It is July 3rd, Friday, and we're going to be going through Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19 for a little devotional today. So I want to go ahead and dive right into it. Starting in verse 11, it says, "Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. And as he was going into the village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, 'Jesus, Master, have pity on us.' And when he saw them, he said, 'Go show yourselves to the priests.' And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, 'Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?' And then he said to him, 'Rise and go, your faith has made you well.'" So there's a lot to unpack in this passage of scripture. And the one thing I want to point out right away is that there were not 2 or 3 men that came to Jesus, but 10. It was common for people who had leprosy to live together in leper colonies. And these men most likely lived together in their own little colony, in their own little community. So they, as a community, approached Jesus. Now, if you had leprosy, you were considered unclean in that day, and that is why they had to keep their distance from Jesus when they called to him. And right away, I connected with that a lot, because how many of us can relate to that thinking that we need to keep ourselves distant from Jesus because of how unclean we are? And I love the text that it says, when he saw them, he sees them. He didn't ignore them. He didn't rebuke them. He didn't question them. He didn't ask, "What is wrong with you?" He saw them. He saw what they were dealing with. He saw what afflicted them. And he saw what was preventing them from coming close to him. And he sends them to show themselves to the priests. So you would only do this once you had already been made clean, to prove that you had ability to come back into society. And I love that it says, as they went, they were cleansed. As they moved in faith, as they moved on a word from God, they were cleansed. How many times do we ask God to move in our lives when in actuality he wants us to move in faith? Notice it wasn't when they finally got to the priest that they were healed, but it was as they went, they were healed. When we move in faith and obedience, miracles, signs, and wonders break out. And when one of the men realizes that he's been healed, he turns and runs back to Jesus and he throws himself at his feet. And he was a Samaritan. He had not only been a leper, but a Samaritan. So not only was he unclean, but he was less than in society. And at the beginning of this passage, this man had to keep his distance, but at the end, he finds himself close in Jesus' presence. And Jesus took someone who was far from him and brought them in close. We always wind up back in his presence. And so I love this passage of scripture, and I wanted to be able to encourage you all to keep calling out to the Lord, especially in this season. And a lot of times it feels like we have to keep ourselves at a distance, but that's not the case. Know that he hears you, know that he sees you. Remember that he speaks to you and invites you into intimacy with him. And remember that even if we can't see it or feel it at first, that when we move in faith, God moves in the supernatural. I love you guys, and I hope you guys have a great day, and I can't wait to see you guys at church.